Welcome to our channel, Absorbent Mind Montessori Parenting, where we talk about Montessori philosophy and our journey into parenthood. What do you think we're talking about today?
I think, because of our backdrop, we're talking about clothes.
We're talking about clothes. Specifically today, we're talking about applying Montessori philosophy to baby clothes.
Okay.
I'm sure we will return in a year to talk about toddler clothes, but we're going to talk about baby clothes today.
Baby clothes.
Baby clothes.
Baby clothes. Okay. We have a lot of those.
We have too many.
We've already started giving some away.
Yeah.
As she is grown out of them.
These are 5 things that I consider, or principles that I follow when purchasing clothes for our baby based on Montessori philosophy.
Okay.
Wait, what's that?
I didn't know that's what we were talking about.
Oh, what did you think we were talking about?
I don't know, because you don't prep me for these. I come in blind.
Okay, so with that, there's 2 or 3 tenets of Montessori philosophy that I apply, that most people who think about it, I think, apply when thinking about clothes, specifically baby clothes. Can you guess what they might be?
I think one probably has to do with movement.
Okay.
Yeah, like freeing them up so that they can get where they're going. What?
You got it.
Okay. Well, I mean, that one's obvious to me because even when I put her down on the ground, if she's wearing slippy pants, she can't move as well as when she's wearing shorts or no pants at all. So it's
right.
I feel like access to her hands is probably part of it too.
You're gonna spoil the video.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's great.
Because a lot of times her clothing, if it's just slightly too big for her, she's not ready for it yet, it'll slip over her hands, and then suddenly she can't grab or feel or touch or put her hands in her mouth. I can't say, because I know one of our principles is that we want it to be made out of natural materials, but I don't think that's Montessori.
No, that's not necessarily Montessori. I mean, some people argue that it is, that shows up on people's lists. We choose natural fibers because we are concerned about the planet and our consumption. So.
Right. Okay, so I got 2 out of the 3.
Yeah, and really, when we're talking about the overarching philosophy, you basically got it. We're thinking about freedom of movement as the primary decision maker, and then we're thinking about respect and autonomy. As we're dressing her body, she's not able to do that yet, so being really mindful about what we're putting her in, and how we're putting it on her, how we're putting her in it.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's really the big 2 things, is freedom of movement. So when we say freedom of movement, it's exactly what you said, that what we mean is we are removing any obstacles or barriers to her being able to move her body, and particularly to her on the natural gross motor development side, being able to develop her gross motor skills independently. And then, like I said, respectfulness. You guys know what that means. We want to treat her like a whole human being. And as long as she can't make active choices about what she's wearing, I try to be really mindful about the choices I'm making for her.
Sure.
Okay, so let's dive in to...
Are we starting with number 1 or number 5?
Oh, I think number 1. They're not ranked necessarily. They're just 5 things.
Number 5. Wait. Number 1.
Number 1. You inadvertently guessed the first thing on our list of considerations, which is exposed hands and feet. We don't ever want to have covered hands, particularly for newborns. But really for all babies, for all people, you don't need to have your hands covered.
And what's wild about that is there's so many clothes made with like flaps that are supposed to cover kids' hands.
Yeah, they're these little fold over things. We don't use those. I mean, I don't necessarily not buy something if it has this on there, but we definitely don't use it.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking for it.
Yeah.
Footies. We have these. She has zip-up footy pajamas. She has these pants that have feet in them. But really, as much as possible, particularly if it's warm, keeping her feet exposed as well. Not putting socks on her, not putting shoes on her. And like you said, I can show you all of these things because we do have them. I understand people are going to buy you stuff. You're going to get something because it's really cute. Like, it's not never, it's most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, if it's cold and she's sleeping, she doesn't need her feet.
So most of our nerve endings are in our hands and feet. Babies are coming into this world with only the information they received in utero, which is a lot. It's a lot of data. There's so much information that they're trying to get into their brains as quickly as possible. She's experiencing, especially now, but even as a newborn, was experiencing the texture of skin, the texture of cloth, the texture of wood, the texture of metal, the texture of tile, all of this different sensory information that we're depriving her of if we cover up her hands and feet.
Yeah.
In addition to freedom of movement, there is a little bit of respect and autonomy that goes into this as well. Babies start sucking on their hands in utero, and they spend basically from the time they have a mouth and hands when they're in utero, they spend that time until they're born sucking on their hands. And so if we limit their access to their hands right after they're born, we've interrupted a soothing pattern that they've developed for themselves for their whole existence. And so, respecting them and their sense of order and their point of reference for something like maybe the one thing in the world that they're familiar with is not particularly kind and is definitely not necessary.
I've never felt the need to cover her hands.
Yeah. The other thing is that babies, particularly again newborns, tell us they're hungry by sucking on their hands. And so when you cover their hands, you're interrupting your ability to communicate with them, their ability to communicate with you. And again, like not being very respectful of their needs and skills.
That's something as a first-time parent and somebody who's never been around infants, I had no idea that was a thing. But as soon as I learned that was like invaluable knowledge.
Yeah.
That, she's chewing on her hands, give her to mom.
Yeah. Developing movement skills, developing motor skills requires the use of hands and feet. She is gripping the floor with her toes, pulling herself over on the bars of her co-sleeper, grabbing sheets, right? Like babies are doing so much work to develop their motor skills constantly. When they're awake, when they're asleep, all the time they're moving their bodies, trying to figure out how to be people. And again, covering their feet and their hands, but particularly in this case their feet, is an impediment to that. We're slowing down their ability to develop those skills. Number 2.
Number 2.
So we're back to freedom of movement. No excessive bulk or stiffness or fabric, anything that's going to hinder movement. We want
like those little 90s froofy dresses.
Yeah,
so like starchy.
We've got
but there'd be like 10 other layers of froofiness under here.
We got a tutu here. We've got ruffles here.
Yeah.
Even like a bulky hood, particularly for babies that aren't sitting up yet, really any age, but particularly like this is a separate point almost, but observation, like everything in Montessori philosophy, is such a huge part of it. Look at what your baby is doing, what skills they're trying to develop, and how their clothes may be hindering that. So a baby that's laying on the floor trying to roll over, any extra fabric is going to be an impediment to doing that.
Like a cushion on their side that's keeping them from...
And the same thing, like you said, if she's crawling or working on crawling, having her knees exposed is going to be helpful. Having her elbows exposed is going to be helpful.
Especially on like hardwood floors or tile floors.
Right.
If she can't get her knees up under her because they keep slipping out.
Yeah. And so really as streamlined as possible. Something that we encountered, you know, shirts versus a onesie. A shirt was really great for maybe the first 2 months, because she wasn't really rolling yet, and she liked to grasp the edges of the shirt. And so that was its own benefit, you know. In observing her developmentally, she was working on a skill by just playing with the edges of her shirt. But then I began to notice as she was attempting to roll over, her shirt was riding up because she's laying on the floor. And that, I was like, oh, that's an impediment. And so we started putting her in onesies more regularly because it's smoother and she can just, you know, slide around. So be thinking about that, keeping an eye on, you know, is there excess bulk? Is there excess stiffness? Is there anything about what my child's wearing that will prevent them from doing the thing they're trying to do? It's a pretty practical principle, and I think we apply it to older kids all the time. But people don't always think about the work that babies are doing.
Yeah. Number three. This
is a lesson we learned. I didn't necessarily have this principle before having a baby.
Okay.
But I observed it. Sleepwear with legs. And I had to kind of persuade you of this. So when she was a newborn, we had her
in gowns. Okay.
And that was fine. Again, she wasn't like doing a whole... I mean, she was. They're always doing a lot.
But she was mostly just a sleepy little bean.
Right. And it was good for providing some proprioceptive input, right? Like she would kick and... you know, kind of hit up against the edges of it. But again, as I realized, as she started turning and started rolling and started using her legs for a lot of movement, that the gowns were an impediment. And so we switched to pajamas with legs. Anytime, whether she's awake or asleep, if she's moving her body, that there's not an obstacle to her moving it as freely as possible.
Like a swaddle.
Yeah, swaddles aren't technically clothes, so we're not talking about that. But
but I mean, that's kind of what the gown did. Is it like it was like a bag? It was like a cocoon for her body, rather than allowing her to flex freely.
Yeah. So sleepwear with legs is a choice that we make.
Number 4.
Front closures for babies who can't sit.
Front closures are like, I'm an evangelist. I've already told friends who are expecting, like, front closures are the way to go.
And this is, I mean, really these last 3, I would say, are my personal interpretations of Montessori philosophy. Not necessarily something that's super widespread on the internet. Everybody's on board with exposed hands and feet. But front closures, I think this falls into the category of autonomy and respect for babies who can't sit. I think babies who can sit, you can get them used to pulling something over their head. But particularly for newborns, but really I think any baby that's not able to sit, pulling something over their head when they don't have a lot of control over their neck or their head and they can't really be a participant is not fun.
And you're fighting with the little armholes to get their arms in. It's like it's traumatic for them because like the world has gone dark and their arms are being shuffled around.
Yeah, being able to lay the piece of clothing out and lay her on top of it and put her arms in and kind of talk her through that process of, okay, we're going to put your right arm in, we're going to put your left arm in, we're going to put your legs in, just feels a lot more respectful to me than bobbling her head around.
It's kind of like making her a participant in her own dressing.
Yes.
Buying everything exactly the same, makes dressing her a lot less painful because I'm not having to guess at where it buttons or where it snaps. There's like, she's got like 4 or 5 different sets of all the same thing, and I know, oh, the kimono goes on like this, oh, the onesie goes on like that. But when we first started out, when people were buying her clothes, and I was having to juggle, oh, this one snaps this way and this one snaps that way, oh, this one doesn't have snaps, it's got this other kind of clothes. It was kind of infuriating to try and dress her because you're dealing with this, like, I mean, you're doing a puzzle, you're doing a Rubik's Cube trying to get her dressed, but man, when you started just buying her all the same shirt.
Number 5 is separates. I mentioned this earlier. And this is something I think a lot of people practice in toddlerhood with potty training. I think it applies earlier on a little bit because we practice elimination communication. And so this is maybe not something that's necessarily Montessori, but I think it ties in.
Yeah,
so,
it's in that respectful parenting paradigm.
And a lot of it still has to do with, even if you're not practicing elimination communication, your child being able to stay partially clothed during diaper changes or potty opportunities is respectful to them. Just taking off a pair of pants versus taking off an entire onesie or a jumpsuit situation is just easier.
Well, and it minimizes fuss for them.
Yeah.
It's like less rigmarole for them to endure, which could stir them up on their way to the potty and shut down the whole process.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So we're a big fan of separates. I count separates as a onesie and pants or a shirt and pants, but not necessarily something that's like a full body pajama situation.
And like Montessori aside, getting everything kind of in the same color band makes, for at least for my dad job of like being just completely unfashionable, it makes it really easy for me to dress her in something that looks nice because everything goes with everything else.
Yeah, we're veering into capsule wardrobe territory, but so bonus point.
Pew, 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 pew. Is that too big an energy for this series?
It's fine. Sometimes no clothes is best. Yeah.
It's true.
We offer diaper-free time.
Yeah, I was going to say no clothes.
Yeah, 0 clothes. All clothes, even the most streamlined clothes, affect freedom of movement. Having a shirt is going to limit how far you can rotate your shoulder. Having pants is going to limit how far you can rotate your hips. Even if it's just an elastic cuff, it's going to place pressure on your stomach. And diapers particularly are designed to be, constricting. Not necessarily to prevent movement, but to keep solids in.
To contain. And they're bulky. No matter
and they're bulky.
If they're cloth diapers or disposable
diapers.
It's like a joint. Like it's a sphere that can be rotated on, and sometimes that's not what they want to do.
Right. And so we, especially again when it's warm, if it's 70 degrees, really 60 degrees or above, and we've got time, we just let her hang out naked and explore all the ways she can move without any restriction.
And sometimes that means changing your bed sheets.
Yeah, sometimes
in the middle of the day.
Sometimes things get beat on. It is my understanding. I tried to find this quote before we recorded and I couldn't, but it's my understanding that in actual Montessori philosophy things, that Maria Montessori recommended that babies wear no clothes. that the temperature be set, if at all possible, to be warm enough that they could be as close to naked as possible for freedom of movement.
Yeah, makes sense. She moves at her best when she has 0 clothes and 0 cushions and can just wiggle.
So, those are our 5 plus a couple bonus.
We'll throw them up on the screen here so you can screenshot that.
The 5 things we consider when we're shopping for baby clothes. We're talking right now Really babies 0 to 6-ish months old, babies who aren't quite sitting yet. I think a lot of the principles still apply beyond that point. But we'd love to hear what things you think about when you're purchasing baby clothes.
Especially if it's beyond that 6 months, because we're about to have to make those considerations.
Yeah. Is there anything we said that you don't agree with, that you think Maria Montessori would have a different opinion about? Let us know.
Yeah, drop a comment.
Yeah, things we didn't consider. We really appreciate your time. Please let us know what you're interested in us discussing, and we'll see you next time.
Smack that subscribe button.
Yeah.
And follow us on Instagram.
Follow us on Instagram if you want. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube things.
See you next time.